Imposter syndrome. It's a feeling of inadequacy.
It's a fluke. I got accepted into the graduate program.
It's a feeling that you don't belong here in the institution or your graduate program.
I conducted the research, but I'm not ready to present. My work just isn't good enough.
It's that you're afraid that someone eventually is going to reveal or unmask you as what you fear you are, an imposter.
I'm not actually prepared to be here. They're going to see right through me.
The answer is no, and the reason is I didn't really feel that I succeeded in graduate school until very late.
Yes, I was very worried that it was only a matter of time that people are going to figure out that I didn't belong, that I was not as smart as the others in my cohort. And it actually affected not only how I performed in my graduate seminars, but also how I interacted outside of the classroom with members of my cohort. So, I was scared, to socialize or, go to grabbing some lunch or coffee with some of them because I felt that I may expose myself as an imposter, that they might see that his background, his experiences have not prepared him for the rigors of graduate school.
I had started the history program, I was familiar with the program, I was familiar with the faculty, and I was scared out of my mind.
There were people with more experience than me, so that was heightened in my doc program because there were people that had been doing it a lot longer. I had a couple of oh shit moments in my doc program, and that's when I was like, oh my gosh, should I really be here? Was this a mistake? I had that many times over in my doc.
It can lead you to feeling that your admission to graduate school is a fluke or mistake.
I definitely thought that there must have been some mistake. I came from a large undergraduate institution, but even with that, I still felt very unsure. You would go to that first orientation with the other grad students, and they were impressive. They were very strong. I thought I was well out of my league. And so, yeah, there must have been some mistake, and if I just sit here, no one will know.
So when I entered graduate school, there was an underlying sense that was always in the back of my mind that maybe I had been accepted due to luck or perhaps by chance. But I wanted to really believe that I was accepted on my merit. But it never left the back of my mind, that, perhaps I didn't belong here.
I chalked it up to timing and then luck. I felt fairly strong going into grad school, especially with undergrad. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to go back. So I felt pretty confident going into grad school. And then once I got there, then that soon went away real quick.
It will limit your discussions in class because you're afraid that it'll make you sound stupid, and it will validate every concern you have about your right to be there.
Yeah, all the time. That was the challenge, was constantly, when am I empowered to speak? When can I do this?
Yes, and it depends on the instructor, but some of the instructors I would definitely not kind of lead on that I didn't know something. I mean, they already knew, but at times they weren't very helpful. Or it was expected that I should have known something that I was stumped on, and they wouldn't help you with it.
Yes, I didn't want to look stupid. You don't want to look stupid. I don't want to say that and then give away that I'm younger than everyone else or I don't have the same experience. So I would refrain from sharing a lot of things, let alone raising my hand. Yeah.
It becomes an even greater issue when you start to compare yourself to your fellow graduate students because you believe they understand it already. They've got it, they belong.
And it wasn't really until I started interacting with my cohort, my people that were, some professors, that I started to have a lot of self-doubt about myself. And this occurred especially when a lot of members of my cohort were excelling in courses. I felt that they were better prepared. In seminars, I felt that they were much better than me, that they perhaps had a better training. So some of them were coming from, these elite universities, Ivy League schools, and I had just gotten out of a local state college. So there was this sense that perhaps they were better prepared than I was for the rigors of a graduate program.
Yeah and no. I remember being in a seminar and thinking I sounded dumb, and everybody or somebody said something really smart, and I'm like, I'm never gonna get there. But I thought some people might have had more training than me.
Mainly because the depth of knowledge that I needed to be able to get comfortable and get up to speed with where I thought everyone else was not there.
Yeah, I think it's a very common feeling that you're up against something or a group of people that's really, really smart. Yeah.
Constructive comments given by faculty only further validate your concerns.
Absolutely. And I had those moments where, I did a number of reading and conferences for my work in history where I would feel sick to my stomach when I would go in and have the conversations with the faculty member, not because they were cruel or anything else, but because I was so worried that they would see through the quality of my writing, through the quality or lack thereof of the research that I had done and how I engaged with those texts. I was so scared. And so I would go there almost expecting to be lambasted, like, what are you doing here?
Because I was so hard on myself and I had that kind of insecurity naturally, in times of feedback, that's when I didn't have that ego and competition with other people thing working for me, so it was hard to hear those things. All I would hear was the criticism and not the things that I was doing well. And then I would beat myself up about it for the next couple days.
Yeah, I think when it comes to that, there's a layer to that, right? So when you're thinking about constructive criticism, for me, I have to think about how I respond to that as a woman, as an African American, as someone who came from these very humble working class, roots. And I often thought that when people were being given constructive criticism, that they were being critical. So what happens is when you're in that space, you feel very vulnerable. So even something that's meant to be positive, you can interpret as overly negative.
At the beginning, perhaps, coming in as an undergrad and not knowing what to expect in grad school, but later on I realized, this constructive criticism, it's helpful. It's making me grow, both professionally and personally. And I took it more, not so much as a criticism, more of feedback. Here's the feedback. I know that you have potential to grow, and I know that you are capable of doing this work. Here's some feedback, constructive feedback on how you can improve yourself.
You need to know you're not an imposter. You do belong here. You need to remember that you worked very hard to get here. And your acceptance into graduate school, it's to learn more. That's what the point of this is. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just remind yourself of that. Who you are, why you're here, and what's the intention of this.
I think, let me go back within the framework of identity. As I started to build more parts of my identity, then I was able to lean into different aspects of it. So the thing I've really leaned on is to identify what I'm experiencing and feeling in my body and feeling in the moment and being vulnerable. Again, this is mandated in our field. So it's a discipline-specific thing to be vulnerable. But I think that as I've taken those risks throughout my master's, throughout my doc, throughout supervision, it's the risk-taking that has helped me challenge myself and softening my self-talk so that when it doesn't go perfectly, I can bounce back.
I would tell myself that I should believe in myself, that I can do this work, that I am intelligent and that I belong. And that's a lesson I did not learn even through graduate school frequently. But I would tell myself those qualities, that I belong here.
Establishing an identity is a developmental process, right? It changes over time based on where you're at. So in graduate school, as I was reflecting back, my experience in grad school, I was persistent and not giving up with anything. Writing, as an example, that can be a stumbling block for many of our students, and it was for me, that I didn't want to give up. Because when you're at the thesis stage or dissertation stage, you're on your own, and you have to have that intrinsic motivation within yourself to continue working on this, because now you're not taking a class, you're on your own. And I think that's what did it.
Sometimes when you come into graduate school, people just always have this assumption about who you are and what your perspective is. Especially being African American, I think that people really thought that I was going to come in automatically with a picket sign, and I was just going to start protesting, from the day that I got there. But it was always, for me, it was always a very weird mix. Like when I came in, we were talking about my presence in being in the military. So I had that background, plus I had this background and wanted to do look at racial injustice. So for me, it was oftentimes hard to kind of blend the two, but I wanted to make sure that people understood that my perspective is unique to me. And I did not want to be labeled as, I mean, there are some labels out there, some very harsh labels, right? A harsh label of the angry black woman, right? For example. Or the label of the obstructionist, right? Of the person who's just here to, to stir things up and to start trouble. And I want to make sure that, people understood that if I was saying something that was not pleasing to you, it's not coming from a space where I want to harm you or injure you or tear the system down, although I do want to do that. I don't want to tear the system down, but what I really want to do is I want to be constructive in how we interact with each other.
Remember, there are people out there that support you. Lean on them, look to them. Look for their support. Do those things that make you happy. Be with those people who support you, because that's what's going to help remind you that you do belong here.
I started working out a lot. I played a lot of hockey, played a lot of soccer. It also helped with that social component, because this is going to sound kind of bad. Well, in the sense of a lot of those activities also had undergraduates who were very impressed that you were a graduate student. So it was a nice ego boost, and but also just that social component. You come back to your graduate colleagues, and with a little bit more confidence. And also sports was a great way to just release any frustration. You come back a little bit more calm and ready to accept the punishment of graduate school. Sorry.
I realized that I tried to make sure I had work-life balance before work-life balance was even a term. This was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so I tried to make sure that not only was I committed to the program and I did all my studies and I was there all the time that I needed to be, but that I also did other things so I could remain what I thought was sane. So I remember one year actually, I started going to the gym at 6 a.m. when it opened. And so I was at the gym at 6 a.m., I was in the office by 7 a.m., nobody was there. I got so much done before everybody showed up at 9 or 10 a.m. I felt so productive, so that really helped me that year. I also trained for a marathon, so during I know, it's crazy. During my graduate program, I did the Marine Corps Marathon in Maryland, and I'd always wanted to do a marathon, and it seemed like the right time. And so that gave me an outlet for energy and staying focused, and I got the great high that you get when you're running. I also played soccer in a community league, so I got to hang out with people that weren't all graduate students or academics, and got to hang out and have beers afterwards or whatever we did.
I can achieve, and I may need to ask for help, and help-seeking behavior isn't a bad thing. I may need to vent. Venting isn't a bad thing. I may need to sit down in a quiet space and reread. Those aren't bad things, but those are all things that felt like failures to me. And that felt like personal defeats that reinforced this notion of, if I didn't get it the first time, what am I doing here? Why am I not understanding it when my peers seem to be understanding this stuff? Why am I spending the money? Those types of questions.
It kind of started in undergrad. I was super focused on school, did not necessarily have a life outside of school, would do homework on the weekends, Friday, Saturday night kind of thing. And then once I reached grad school, I actually made a commitment to myself that I was going to let the weekends be my own. And so that is what took me 5 years to get through instead of 4. But it also allowed me a little bit of time to go and enjoy life too. And then one of the other tools that really made a big difference were exercising to deal with a lot of the stress. That had to be a main component of my personal life to be able to deal with a lot of the stress.
The people in your life, your family, your friends, your fellow students, even your faculty, they're going to help you to be successful.
Rely on friends and family, as well as finding those support groups on campus through faculty members and maybe even student organizations. It was very important for me to maintain a very good and healthy relationship with friends and family, because it was important for my mental health in graduate school.
Believe it or not, I'm terribly antisocial. I'm a classic mathematician. I just want to be left alone. And I forced myself to join student clubs. I started off with graduate student clubs, like Graduate Student Association. And I worked my way up to actually being president of the Math Graduate Students Association. So I had to work with faculty. But it was a great way to, it helped me understand how the process worked, how the department worked. And again, that was a great confidence builder because, now I understood how graduate students were selected. I understood what qualities they were looking for. So it wasn't so much of I didn't feel so intimidated anymore.
Having your support network is really important. You know, having your family, your loved ones around, and having a group of friends that you can talk to. And I made some really good friends that we have beer at least once a week, you know, at night to just blow off some steam. That's really helpful. Having, you know, talk to your family, talk to your loved ones, even get into a relationship can be messy, but it can also be very helpful.
Now I see the things that I have accomplished and I realize, you know what, it's because I didn't do this by myself. It's because I got help from my professors, I got help from my friends, I got help from my peers who I said, hey, can you take a look at this paper and edit, or let me know what feedback you have on my writing style.
Both, right? So it helped me with the confidence and the connection to my peers in the program, that I belonged and I connected with them. But also I remember we all connected to study for comprehensive exams. And so I made sure that I had a group of peers of students to study with and to learn about. We also had some great tools in the classroom that we decided we were a very cohesive cohort. And one of the things we did in our classes is we would divide up the articles that we had to read. And so everybody didn't have to summarize all of them on their own. And so I would say, okay, I've got this week's articles, or we shared that week's articles, and then somebody else would get it, and we would share our summaries so that we had study notes not only for the seminar, but for when we got to comprehensive exams.
Not so much a practice, but relying on your cohort that you're going through. That was a big portion of it. Relying on all the people that you were going through coursework with.
I think the biggest thing I leaned on is finding other students that were going through the same thing and building that network. That was the biggest support I had. Building relationships with instructors and professors, building relationships with students, because they got it.
You just need to remember that you worked very hard to get here, and that your graduate program, who actually reviewed your application, made a good choice. They chose you to be here. You belong here.
I think you should remember that imposter syndrome is a common experience. You are not the only one. You won't be the last person that feels this way. Many before you have felt this way, many after you will feel this way. But the important thing is to try as best as you can to cast away those feelings of self-doubt, and remember that your voice, your perspectives are valuable, and that you are contributing something very important to the conversation when you enter graduate school.
I would like to have been told that this is a normal process you're going to experience, and be gentle with yourself. Like, the thing is that being rough on yourself and having that internal critic is helpful because it keeps you moving. Because if you always have a goal, it's awesome because you have some motivation to get there and making yourself better and improving, and that's why we end up where we end up. Graduating with our masters, maybe going for a doc. That's how we become successful.